Good morning. So I, Chair Shelley Bailey, call the Prescription Drug Affordability Board meeting of April 16, 2025 to order at 9:03 a.m. Pacific. Melissa, if you could please call roll.
Chair Shelley Bailey.
Present.
Vice Chair Amy Burns.
Present.
Dan Hartung.
Present.
Lori Hoagland is on her way. Robert Judge.
Present.
Chris Lehman is excused. John Murray.
Present.
Dan Kennedy.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Melissa. So our agenda begins with a conflict of interest declaration. We have updated the conflict of interest form and we'll send it to board members. It is also posted for viewing on the PDAB website. I now want to ask if board members have any declarations of potential or actual conflict of interest, or if board members have met with entities or individuals related to board activities. Board members provided testimony related to prescription drugs to the Oregon legislature. Please give the committee name and date if that is something that you participated in. So I believe I saw Mr. Murray, your hand was raised first. So Mr. Murray, welcome, and you have the floor.
Thank you. Chair Bailey, under advisement from the Oregon Government Ethics Commission, I declare a potential conflict of interest due to my ownership of Murray Drugs, comprised of 3 independent pharmacies in Eastern Oregon that have pharmacy services contracts with PBMs, insurance companies in the state of Oregon. Using the language of the Ethics Commission, because the PDAB is an advisory board that simply provides information to others who have rulemaking authority, guidance from OJAC is that it appears that at most you would have a potential conflict of interest each time PDAB meets to discuss a specific prescription drug or related matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Mr. Judge, I believe I saw your hand up next. Mr. Judge, welcome. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Bailey. For the record, I want to make a statement regarding my potential conflicts of interest. I'm employed in the health insurance industry and also serve on this PDAB. Due to these dual roles, it's possible that matters before this committee can present an appearance of a conflict of interest. But I want to affirm my commitment to ethical conduct, and should any matter arise that in my judgment presents an appearance, I'll disclose the relevant circumstances and recuse myself from any discussions or votes relative to that specific issue. To further clarify into the points that you raised, Chair Bailey, entirely separate from my role on the PDAB, I may from time to time engage with the state legislature, either on an individual capacity or as a representative of the insurance industry. I want to be clear that any such engagement is distinct and independent from my role on the board. I have in recent months have not had any activity before the board, before the legislature in that capacity, but I just want to make that known. Those legislative activities are solely related to my own professional interests and those of the insurance industry. So that's my disclosure for the day.
Thank you, Mr. Judge. And Dr. Hartung, I also saw your hand raised, so welcome, and you have the floor.
Yes, I just want to disclose that I have ongoing consulting arrangements with the National Multiple Sclerosis Society to support some of their advocacy work. They have materials in the public comment, as well as there is the drug related to MS on our affordability list or subset list. And so just wanted to provide that disclosure.
Dr. Hartung, thank you for your information. I would now like to ask, I'm not seeing any other hands raised, I would like to ask members if they have any changes to the draft minutes from the March 19th, 2025 agenda. Or not agenda, the summary of our meeting. And if there are no draft edits that would like to be proposed, I would like to ask for a motion and a second to approve the minutes.
This is Board Member Kennedy. I move for approval.
Thank you, Board Member Kennedy. Do we have a second to approve the minutes?
This is John Murray. I'll second the motion.
Okay, Mr. Murray, thank you. Before we call roll, I do want to acknowledge that I did see Board Member Hoagland's hand raised. So I just wanted to confirm that I saw visually that she is now in the meeting. So Melissa, can you please call roll related to the approval of the minutes?
Dan Hartung.
Aye.
Lori Hoagland.
Aye.
Robert Judge,
Abstain, I was absent the last meeting.
Dan Kennedy,
Aye.
John Murray,
Aye.
Vice Chair Amy Burns,
Aye.
Chair Shelley Bailey.
Aye.
Motion passes.
And Melissa, thank you for calling roll. I would now like to call on Executive Director Ralph Magrish to provide us with a program update. Mr. Magrish, welcome. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Bailey. Good morning, everyone. A few brief updates. To start, Senate Bill 289, which is our PDAB housekeeping bill, passed out of the Senate and had its first public hearing in House Health yesterday afternoon with Courtney testifying. As a reminder to everyone, that bill did three things. It proposed language in the bill to, or the amendment rather, to change our statutory requirement from conducting and completing 9 drug affordability reviews a year to up to 9 affordability reviews a year. Secondly, it removed the requirement for DCBS to provide PDAB with a list of prescription drugs that are collected by the Drug Price Transparency Program that are subject to 60-day price increase reporting. Finally, it replaced our generic report with an annual requirement with a new provision that relevant content would be incorporated into our annual affordability review report rather. Next up, quite interesting, earlier this week, the National Association of Attorney Generals, on behalf of a bipartisan coalition of 39 state and territorial attorney generals, sent a letter to congressional leaders urging them to pass an act prohibiting pharmacy benefit managers, or PBMs, from owning or operating pharmacies. Oregon's Attorney General Dan Rayfield did sign on to that letter. It is viewable at the NAAG website, which is naag.org, excuse me, under their press release section. If folks are interested in reviewing that, I would encourage you to do so. Next, I regret to share the news with you that Robert Judge on our board has given notice that he has submitted his resignation from the board following the June meeting. We are very, very grateful for everything that Robert has done as a PDAB member and wish him the best of luck. We will save that full goodbye for June, though. Let me be very clear about that. In the short run, we will have information about how to apply for the vacant position up on our website by the end of this week. At this point, rather, I'm anticipating that we will keep that posting up through June 6th. This deadline tracks on a timeline for September Senate confirmations. So pending when that does get scheduled, I'd anticipate the vacancy being seated for our September or October board meeting at the latest. I encourage any and all interested parties to apply. As a reminder, statute calls for board members to have a background in clinical medicine or healthcare economics. Next up, a brief report or update rather on the request for information, or RFI, that our team has been preparing to look at alternative paths to net pricing information. You will recall that based on previous board discussions earlier this year, that there was interest in exploring what commercially available data pricing would be available and potential analytics from commercially available sources. That conversation was around the identification of available options that could help the board identify future tools to understand drug pricing and affordability. At this point, we're tracking for next month, being May, the board to have opportunity to provide review and feedback of that document and discussion, ability to offer edits to that draft. In June, we will bring it to the board to finalize and issue that RFI, anticipating the month of July for questions from prospective respondents and anticipating August responses being due and us being able to share that with you all. Finally, I want to acknowledge and congratulate our own board member, John Murray, for the good work he and his family are doing in Wheeler County and the partnership that they've established with the Oregon State Pharmacy Association and the Eastern Oregon Coordinated Care Organization that helps support it. For those that missed it, there was a really nice article in the Oregonian last week that featured John and his pharmacy and the work they are doing to improve access for needed prescriptions in rural Oregon and help people avoid long driving distances. John is setting up a new freestanding medication locker for those that are not familiar or saw the article at the Asher Community Center in Fossil, so patients can pick up their meds at more convenient times without needing to drive a half hour or more each way to do so. And I believe they have plans to do that at another site later this spring. It will offer a dedicated phone receiver for pharmacist consultation, refrigeration if needed, and other features. So good on you, John, and thank you for the work that you're doing to help improve access to medications for rural Oregonians. That is the end of my report. Chair Bailey, I will go ahead and welcome Jesse O'Brien, the DCBS Policy Manager here at the Division of Financial Regulation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph. Welcome, Jesse.
Morning, Chair, members of the board, and everyone. I'm Jesse O'Brien. I'm the policy manager with the Division of Financial Regulation at DCBS, and I'm here to give a brief legislative update. Melissa has my sharing screen, has my written update on the bills that we've been tracking related to drug pricing. And that I just sent that out this morning because I've been kind of running a little behind, so that will get sent out to the board later on, I imagine. But the big update is that last Wednesday was one of the major deadlines of the legislative session, the first chamber work session deadline, which is the deadline for bills to have a committee vote in their chamber of origin. And so we do now have a clearer sense of which bills actually have legs. And I've noted in this document here which bills we've been tracking are dead and which ones are still alive in one form or another. So I think the big update is that the probably most significant drug pricing related legislation having to do with significantly increasing regulation of pharmacy benefit managers and creating a new licensure program for pharmaceutical services administrative organizations, or PSAOs. Those concepts are both still alive and up for continued discussion and negotiation, but they have been referred to the House Committee on Rules. So that's House Bill 2149 and House Bill 3212. Those will be the vehicles for those concepts. The House Rules Committee and its equivalent in the Senate are committees that are not subject to the deadlines. So when bills need additional work and negotiation, they often get sent there, and it may be as much as a couple of months now before we know what will ultimately happen with those bills, since they're not subject to the deadlines. And then I'm not going to go through the spreadsheet here in detail, but I'll just mention a few other bills that are seemingly on track for passage at this point. Of course, we don't know whether they will ultimately pass or not, but they have met the deadlines and are continuing to move forward. One is House Bill 2057, which prohibits requiring a modifier or other indicator for 340B drugs. There's also a couple of other bills moving forward that relate to 340B, House Bill 2385 and Senate Bill 533, which both prohibit drug manufacturers from interfering with 340B acquisition in specified ways. There's also a bill moving forward, House Bill 3226, which adds PSAOs to an existing definition of pharmacies. And then Ralph mentioned that the PDAB technical fix bill, Senate Bill 289, is moving forward, has already passed the Senate. And then there's a number of dead bills, of course, some of which are more notable than others. One that I thought I would particularly mention, because we've been watching it closely, is House Bill 3082, which is a bill that would have expanded on DFR's drug price transparency program to create more reporting about patient assistance programs, and specifically the number of consumers participating in those programs. And that bill was a little bit of a procedural oddity in that it passed out of committee and went to the House floor, but then at the last minute got pulled from consideration. We heard that was because possibly some votes changed, or ultimately they didn't have the votes that they thought for the bill. So that bill is also now dead. But yeah, that's the update I have with regard to prescription drug bills. There are, of course, countless bills on other subjects, and I'm happy to answer questions about any of that or anything else that would be helpful.
Thank you, Jesse. Do any board members have any follow-up questions or any kind of questions related to context or anything that Jesse can provide to help kind of enlighten background related to any of these topics? Mr. Judge, I see that your hand is raised. Mr. Judge, you have the floor.
Yeah, just a quick question of calendaring, Jesse. Thanks for the update. Second chamber, making it out of the second. What's that deadline there? In May?
It is in May. I don't remember the day off the top of my head. I can look that up and share that in a second here.
Okay, thank you.
While he's looking up that day, does anyone else have any additional questions related to anything that Jesse shared with us today that you would like to ask of him while he's looking up that link? Ms. Hoagland, your hand is raised. You have the floor.
Just HB 3212. I couldn't really see where that's at because of the way the screen sharing was. Can you just say quickly?
Yes, so that is one of the bills that was referred to the House Rules Committee, and that is the bill that would create a number of new requirements for pharmacy benefit managers. And my understanding is that is still heavily under discussion and negotiation, and may still be moving forward, but at this point, it will be a while before we know one way or another.
So Robert,
And I did look up the second chamber deadline is May 23rd.
Thank you, Jesse.
and Robert, your hand is still raised. So did you have anything else you wanted to discuss?
No.
Does anyone else have any additional questions of Jesse? Jesse, I know there's a lot going on, so thank you for your thoroughness related to all of this and for making it efficient to update us on all this work. So it means a lot and it's very helpful to us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So this portion of our agenda is related to public comments that were submitted or requested in advance. The board received 12 written comments, which are reviewed by the board and posted to the board website. I'm going to list the ones that are posted on the board website right now before we move into oral testimonies. So Voices of Healthcare Action provided 2 written comments. Aaron Phelps from Grant Pass, Oregon provided a written comment. Seth Grenier from the National Multiple Sclerosis Society. Andrea Todd Harlan from Sanofi. Jessica McBride from the Coalition for Affordable Prescriptions. Scott Bertani from Health HIV. Stacy Worthy from Johnson & Johnson. Tiffany Westrick Robertson from Ensuring Access Through Collaborative Health. Sarah Lanford from Oregon Society of Medical Oncology and Association for Clinical Oncology, Carl E. Schmidt, HIV Hepatitis Policy Institute, and Mikkel Peters, Global Coalition on Aging. Before we continue, though, to the public comment portion of the agenda, I would like to invite people to participate in the board survey about prescription drugs for affordability review. The surveys are located on the PDAB website. There is a QR code here on the screen that will take you to the PDAB website. Learn more about the surveys from the flyers included in today's agenda materials and posted online. Additionally, I also want to invite patients and caregivers to sign up to speak during the May 21st board meeting. Sign up by submitting public comment form on the PDAB website. The QR code displayed on the screen will take you to the public comment form on our board's website. We want to hear from people who are affected by prescription the prescription drugs that we will be reviewing. So now moving to today's public comment period, I do want to reference that for today's meeting, the board received 5 requests to speak before the board today. I will call on those who signed up to speak and ask them to state their name and organization if they're associated with an organization. Each will have 3 minutes to speak. As a reminder, the board will not deliberate on issues or requests during this time. The first individual that I have on my list to speak is Nathan Saucer. So Nathan, if you are here today, welcome, and you have the floor. And as a reminder, please keep to the 3 minutes. And Melissa, if you could please confirm if Nathan Saucer is here today.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Welcome.
All right. Terrific. Hello. Thanks for letting me share my little horror story. Near the end of 2018, I developed atopic dermatitis, and it started out not too bad, but it got really bad really quick, to the point that I was losing sleep over it, and it just made it like impossible to be sure of anything I was doing at work was correct. So I kept having to double check, triple check, quadruple check everything. And then eventually it got to the point that I was losing so much sleep that I stopped being able to remember days happening. I would come in and think it was the day before and stuff. I went to a dermatologist and they prescribed me Dupixent, and they were like 100% confident that it would fix me right up and be terrific in every way. But then when I went to insurance, they were like, no, you gotta try all these other medications first and see if any of them work. And they all had like laundry lists of scary side effects and stuff. So I hesitantly went through it, doing each one, and some of them helped a little, but nothing that made it easier to work. And eventually I jumped through all their hoops and they okayed it, but they would only pay for half of the like $2,000 per dose that this drug was. And there was no way I could pay $1,000 a month or whatever it was. But then I don't remember how I heard about it, but the manufacturer of Dupixent ran a co-pay program where they would just cover the other half of the price. And to this day, that still strikes me as very strange. Like we're like, how much does this drug cost? And they're like, well, how much you got? It feels like. So, but I did finally get that drug, and it did fix me right up. It pulled me back from the brink. I was doing real bad, and it came in just in the nick of time. It would have been nice if it had come in several months before, when the doctor had originally prescribed it. But you know, it is what it is, I guess. I still got a few seconds left, so I guess I wanted to thank you all for working to make things better. These days, it feels like there's nobody up or down the ladder trying to help us, and I just really appreciate it. And that's about all I got to say, I think.
Thank you very much for sharing your story with us today. Now on our list, we have Lauren Sant from Caring Ambassadors Program. Lauren, if you are here, welcome. And Lauren, you now have the floor.
Oh, good morning. Thank you, everyone. My name's Lauren Sant. I'm the Executive Director of the Caring Ambassadors Program. So we are very concerned about the board's approach to the affordability reviews of the 27 medications, basically starting with the April 30th deadline, giving patients less than a month to complete the survey. And at this point, 15 days, I'm not sure how many you've gotten in, but it's not a lot of time. Despite the proposed changes by the Council of Patients, the PIC, the survey questions are still unclear, and any assessment of treatment value must include substantial input from patients and clinicians, as their perspectives are vital to shaping decisions that affect them. Moreover, the board has not clarified how the data collected will be used in the review, or how the affordability will be determined, which raises more concerns about the process. What algorithm will be used to decide if you have enough patient, clinician, or pharmacist feedback on each drug? Is there a number you want to hear from before proceeding under that review? What will you do if there's no response to a drug under review? These are all questions that we have. And honestly, given today's overwhelming news that's happening. People are worried about cuts to Social Security, Medicaid, 401k plans, wondering if they can send their kids to college. I really think the PDAB should be mindful of the mental health of Oregonians during this challenge time and consider extending the period of the survey to align with the actual reviews. I really, once again, want to express my gratitude for your time and consideration. Appreciate the work you're doing. You know, I know you're trying to improve the healthcare for all Oregonians, but I really think that this needs more time, and I hope you will consider that. So thank you again, and I will yield the rest of my time to another speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. Next individual we have on our list is Mikkel Peters from the Global Coalition on Aging. Welcome. You have the floor, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that opportunity. I represent the Global Coalition on Aging's Alliance for Health Innovation. We represent a diverse group of stakeholders dedicated to promoting innovation for healthy aging and improving health equity. I appreciate the opportunity to comment on the draft generic drug report and the process for ability review determinations. However, we have significant concerns regarding the inclusion of certain drugs on the review list, particularly in light of recent federal policy changes that impact public health infrastructure and HIV research. The current data used by the PDAB only accounts for about 25% of Oregon's population, raising concerns about data reliability and the potential exacerbation of healthcare disparities. Accurate and comprehensive data are crucial to ensuring equitable access to care. Innovation has transformed many of the diseases that we know into manageable conditions, significantly enhancing quality of life for aging populations. For instance, advancements in HIV treatment have enabled individuals to live longer, healthier lives. However, affordability reviews and potential upper payment limits could hinder access to these life-saving treatments and stifle future innovation. We urge the board to consider the broader implication of these policies, especially for vulnerable populations. Restricting access to essential medications could result in adverse health outcomes and increased healthcare costs in the long run. In conclusion, we would recommend that the board exclude HIV treatments from the affordability review process and explore alternative approaches that balance cost control with ensuring patient access to essential therapies and fostering ongoing medical advancements. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to speak today, and I wish you the best of luck with finding the right solutions to make Oregon patients' healthcare more affordable.
Thank you for your comments. Next on the list, we have Lisa Bosnovic from Oregon Bioscience Association. Lisa, welcome. You have the floor, and as a reminder, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Bailey and members of the board. For the record, my name is Lisa Bosnovic, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Oregon Bioscience Association, also known as Oregon Bio. Oregon Bio is deeply engaged in this process because we represent the full spectrum of bioscience and medical technology ecosystem in our state. And that runs from the groundbreaking research at our universities to the startup development at Otrati Bioscience Incubator and others, all the way through to the established companies bringing treatments to market. How affordability is defined, how drugs are selected for review, and how value is determined all directly impact the future of innovation in our state and the patients who benefit from it. We recognize and support the need for therapies to be accessible and affordable to the patients for whom they're prescribed. Our members also understand this responsibility deeply, but even though the board does not set an upper payment limit, the work you do, your findings, methods, and conclusions are closely watched by other states, impacted stakeholders, and by those in every stage of drug development. That's why we appreciated your decision in June of last year to revisit the drug selection process, take the time to more clearly define affordability, gather robust data, and consider how a medicine's value can be factored into this work. However, we're now concerned that the process has once again become rushed. At the March meeting, a large subset list of 27 drugs was quickly identified for affordability review, with notice that information on these drugs is due by April 30th. I think, as Lauren mentioned, also that's a short window, and we immediately reached out to our members and stakeholders to ensure that they were aware and could respond. We understand the intention is to complete these reviews by the end of the year, potentially requiring the board to review up to 8 drugs in a single meeting. Based on the experience in 2024, we question whether meaningful, thoughtful reviews with adequate stakeholder engagement can occur under that timeline. We also urge the board to revisit how it narrows the list of drugs. Simply asking board members to submit their top 10 choices does not apply a consistent or transparent methodology for prioritizing reviews. In closing, we ask that the board not rush to meet arbitrary deadlines or to complete a set of number of reviews. Instead, take the time needed to fully understand each medicine, ask questions, engage stakeholders, and evaluate affordability in a meaningful way. Thank you for your time and your commitment to a thorough and thoughtful process.
Thank you. Now we have Daria McGrew, who has signed up to provide oral testimony. Daria, welcome, and you have 3 minutes.
Good morning, Chair Bailey, members of the committee. Thank you, Daria McGrew, on behalf of Pharma. I want to echo some of the comments from Oregon Bio. Pharma has concerns with the lack of concrete and consistent methodology for determining which drugs will be reviewed. The meeting last month started with narrowing the universe of eligible drugs based on clear criteria, but then took a turn later in the meeting. There was discussion of removing categories of drugs and then deciding to keep some or singular drugs for review based on variable or personal criteria. There is additional language in the slides for today's meeting, as mentioned, about the potential discussion of choosing drugs based on personal opinions of board members. We want to strongly caution the board against choosing drugs based on arbitrary decisions and urge you to stick to filtering the universe of drugs based on quantitative and consistent criteria. Additionally, we also have concerns about the number of drugs chosen for review and the proposed timeframe for review. The proposal to review maybe 8 drugs per month doesn't seem consistent with the board's experience last year. In several meetings, there was not enough time to review 3 drugs that were on the agenda for those meetings. Given the time frame that the board meetings are limited to, it really doesn't seem feasible to be able to hear from stakeholders and patients and then meaningfully engage in discussion and analysis of each drug with that number of drugs agendized for future board meetings. We will be submitting a letter detailing these concerns after this meeting, prior to the next meeting. Thank you for your consideration of our concerns today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McGrew. I would now like to announce that the board will adjourn into executive session for legal advice pursuant to ORS 192.6602F. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of audience may not attend. Representatives of the news media are directed not to report or otherwise disclose anything presented or said during executive session. No decision may be made in executive session, and at the end of executive session, the board will return to open session and welcome the audience back. The audience may stay in the Zoom room until the board returns. The board will return to open session in approximately 20 minutes. Again, board members, please stay here while we are transitioned by Melissa into executive session. Okay, we're aware the meeting's being recorded. So this is related to ORS 646A.697, requiring PDAB to prepare an annual report about generic drugs. At the February board meeting, members discussed topics which have been incorporated into the draft report today under review. The board will vote on the final report at the May meeting. Today, Courtney will lead us in a discussion related to the draft generic report. So I'd like to welcome Courtney Whitlock, Senior Policy Analyst, to help facilitate our discussion through the generic drug report. Courtney, welcome, and you have the floor.
My screen and discuss the red lines that were provided from board members to discuss, and then those will be marked as either approved or not approved in this report. Again, starting off with the table of content, providing some background information, additional information about generics and biosimilars. It is my understanding that all board members have read the generic drug report. Majority did not have additional comments. Some did provide comments just for clarification on some sections. Starting here with the generic drug price and market trends and issues. Dr. Hartung provided some clarification in this write-up. Again, this red line was sent to the board members to review. This red line will be uploaded again after the board meeting with any other edits that were applied. So I'm going to start with this section from Dr. Hartung and just ask the board members if there was any concerns with this, or if you would like to have it accepted how the write-up is presented.
I would accept the edits and changes that Dr. Hartung provided to us today.
All right. Thank you, Chair Bailey. Robert, I see your hand up.
Yeah, just wondering, in light of was it today's executive order on additional changes to the generic drug market that the president is seeking, whether we pause to consider that as a directional statement in here?
What are you referring to, Robert? I'm not.
I guess the president announced some executive order on kind of the drug supply chain, stuff that he's trying to do on drug price negotiations, as well as changing the period of time for a drug that could be negotiated on generics and biosimilars. And I think there was one other element related to generic drugs. Anyhow, it just came up this morning. I haven't read it all the way through, but it might be worthwhile just to make sure that we're tracking, even if we just make a reference to it, just so legislature benefits from that.
Robert, I did see that out of the corner of my eye this morning in a news alert. So we obviously have not had time to process that, but likely appropriate that we will at a minimum make reference to that as an addendum or amendment to the report. So yes.
Thanks for the information for the generic drug report itself. Yes. Okay. Thank you for calling that out, Robert. Appreciate it. Again, Dr. Hartung provided just some narrative edits to clarify this section of the generic drug report. Please stop me if you feel that this added section is not in the best interest to include. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep scrolling through.
I think page 6 is noteworthy to call out the addition of biologics. I believe a board member added that.
Yeah. Actually, I want to take a second for this one right here. Dr. Hartung indicated that it seems out of place to match with the rest of the content. I don't know if you want to take a moment to indicate the reason behind that, but this can be deleted and just applied to the rest of the edits as well.
Yeah, I guess in reading that section, it just struck me as not kind of cohesive with the rest of the narrative about, I mean, the first few passages are about just general trends and, providing a foundation about the regulatory aspects of differentiating small molecule generics and biosimilars and things like that. And this one just has a few sentences about shortages, competition, things like that. And so it just seems a little bit out of place, which I know we talk about that further down as well.
So then would board members mind if I remove this?
Could we move it to somewhere under the section that starts at page 13? Yep. I know we're not there yet, but maybe that's a better fit.
All right.
Maybe just placeholder it for now, and then we can see if it fits somewhere else.
In this section?
I was thinking maybe that after seeing what Dr. Hartung said.
Within the generic shortage and impact? You want to
Yeah.
end the section?
Yeah.
All right, let me just put it up here and then.
Yeah, just stick it there and we can revisit it as we go down the line.
Get back up here, all right. Clarification of generics and biosimilar drugs. That work? Okay, hearing no objections. Additional edits are down here. This is provided by Chair Bailey to discuss kind of plan design. Chair Bailey, did you want to clarify any information or any other board members that?
Yeah, I mean, I referenced plan design because earlier in the paragraph, we talk about how consumer attitudes shift or shape things, how healthcare providers' prescribing habits shape things. So I felt it was relevant to also add how plan design shapes things.
Okay. I appreciate the additional information and clarification. Any other comments from board members? Are you accepting of these changes? Hearing none, I'm going to say it's a go. Thank you, Dr. Hartung. Appreciate the thumbs up. So Dr. Hartung, you asked if this was the most costly list. It was not based off of the most costly list. They were determined the most costly out of the aggregated numbers that were pulled from. I'm going to scroll down to, oops, sorry, scroll up to those numbers. So these drugs right here, we did an analysis based off of the carrier data for 2021, 2022, 2023. And these ones hold up consistently as the greatest kind of impact and most costly. So they didn't come from like the most costly list that the carriers report in. They were just identified as the ones that with the highest cost to them.
Yeah, I just felt like there's this focus on these 9 generic drugs, and it was unclear how those 9 were identified. So just a sentence or two that just describes that, you know, we found, you know, the top, is it that these are the top costly of all the generics, or is it, are these the top cost drugs of a larger subset? Again, so just some clarification how these 9 drugs are identified would be helpful.
Okay, we will clarify that up for next time. Just making sure. Thank you for that feedback. Again, just additional.
Oh, Courtney, I want to recognize that.
Oh, sorry, Lori.
So I don't have any screen sharing on my computer. I don't know if that other people, I'm not able to see what you're talking about.
We are able to see.
I can see it.
Okay. All right. So sorry, Lori, I don't know.
I don't know why.
If you're able to toggle, Lori, this packet, or I guess.
Yeah, it was sent to the board members.
Yeah, no, I read it. I just I can't see it right now. That's all. But I'll toggle it on another computer. Thanks.
All right.
Do you see a tab at the top of Zoom? Because sometimes I get confused and there's like I don't know if you see like different tabs, and one says meeting, one says Courtney Whitlock screen. If not, I'm not going to. I'll stop troubleshooting.
Yeah, sometimes with the iPads it can be a little bit more challenging. Okay, again, Chair Bailey, you had added, or you mentioned something was missing here through about the plan design.
Oh, that could have been an internal note to myself that possibly I identified earlier in the document. No, it's been. Yeah, that was an internal note to myself to not forget to add the comment I added in
Okay.
other.
I'm just gonna mark it resolved then.
Everyone can see my thought process on that.
And kind of same thing here. This is a formula.
Another internal thought that I wanted to share with the world.
Okay. Appreciate it. All right, so we are back down to this section. Does the board feel there's a best placement for this information within this section? Let's see. And staff can also work with this and send the edits back out to the board. And if there's any concerns, then the board members can provide additional feedback. At that time.
Perhaps even right before the conclusion on page 25. But I'd like to see us keep it and try to incorporate it somewhere that staff can work.
Yeah, let me work with it. Because again, this is the draft. If it fits better in this section, I'd rather just make sure it's placed appropriately. So, and again, I'll send it back out for the board members to have a review and provide any feedback on that section.
Thank you, Courtney.
Yeah.
I would support its inclusion. It kind of speaks to the truth of supply and demand, unfortunately, in the healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
All right, here we have some feedback or edits from Chair Bailey.
Essentially, because we had a section on ADHD specifically, I thought I would lean into a little bit more of the story related to the supply chain and how much of that started with the lawsuits, back in 2017. But I thought it would be an important piece, especially for Oregonians who may be having challenges accessing those medications, that we share some of the additional supply chain challenges.
Yeah, no, appreciate the additional information on it. Is there any other concerns with this being added in from board members? Otherwise,
I think that's reasonable. The other issue that's related is that DEA actually puts limits on kind of the quotas that could be actually manufactured. This is specific for ADHD, and so that's a contributing factor that I don't think is in this section. That at least we could just, I think we acknowledge.
do you have any references, Dr. Hartung, that you can possibly send to me?
I can send you something. I'm realizing it now that's a contributing factor if we're gonna just be complete about this.
Yeah, that'd be really helpful. And then again, I can do all the edits and then send it out and then review again at the May meeting. Dan Kennedy. I see your hand.
Yes, I would just add from my experience on the PDMP advisory committee that this once again is a supply and demand thing, with the demand for ADHD drugs being the fastest growing controlled substance group prescribed in Oregon.
Okay. Again, if you have any supporting information you can provide for that, then I can create it.
Okay.
Up and then send it back out to the board. Yeah, it really helps when you have supporting documentation for that.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Again, just clarified edits. Chair Bailey added some additional information here.
My intention was to define. I felt we were kind of missing defining what multi-source drugs were. So in my effort to make a concise definition of multi-source drugs, I ended up with a paragraph. So my thought process was to replace the section in red with the section above in yellow.
Okay.
So sorry if I wasn't clear. So I wanted to strike the red sentence.
Perfect. Let me.
I believe they're important. I just wanted to define them first.
Okay.
I think that's what I meant. Yeah.
Okay. Dan, can I see your hand up again? Did you have Or is that from, okay. Any other comments from board members on the updates from Chair Bailey? Otherwise, we will.
I had a comment just about the general section, that the headline for the section says generic drug pricing impact on Medicare and Medicaid, but it seems like this is really focused on Medicaid. I don't remember there's any discussion on Medicare. So if that's not so if we're just having a Medicaid focused discussion, maybe just edit the title to reflect that. The second comment I think relates to the fact that there's the way the Medicaid program, how rebates affect inflationary rebates affect branded drugs, that there are unusual scenarios where Medicaid programs actually prefer branded drugs because they're cheaper than some of the generics. So it's just, again, just nuance to this section. And I can provide that as well if that's.
Yeah, that would be helpful if you don't mind. It is up to the board, you know, I just did this edit to remove Medicare since there isn't enough information.
I think, Courtney, if I may, as mentioned by Robert Judge earlier, this executive order that did drop, what I saw in the corner of my eye did make some reference to generic drugs and Medicare. So we will look at that, and if there's appropriate place to make reference to that and the impact on Medicare and generic drug spending, we can go ahead as staff and put something in for board to review in final cut.
Yeah, I think that would be better actually then.
Okay. I don't know what that means. Thank you. Thank you. Almost through.
Courtney, Robert does have his hand up as well. Sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm because I thought Dan's point was outstanding in terms of the net effect on that Medicaid rebates have on drug costs and drug preferences. Dan, did you say you were going to modify the language that's in that document to capture that?
Yeah, I can provide some language. I was just, and it's not, I didn't want to, doesn't need to be a huge section because it's, again, pretty complicated. But it's just, there are situations where Medicaid, specific types of Medicaid programs might actually be preferring branded drugs versus generics because of the inflationary rebates.
Yeah.
So it's not a kind of black and white. Generics are always cost savings to the Medicaid program.
Yeah, that's what I thought was a good call out.
Okay. Chair Bailey, you may have a comment here.
Or let's see what my personal thoughts are that I neglected to delete. Yeah, I mean, I felt nearly irrelevant was a little strong because it's not irrelevant, right? I mean, I've heard from people that have had their cost of goods changed on the wholesale side. So like, I would not say the effect of tariffs on importation. I would strike that, I guess, with my own rambling to myself. I would strike that. And then in this section also, I want to, because we're on tariffs and importation, I would like to lean into what Mr. Judge said in a previous section. Part of that executive order is related to importation. So we are going to want to add a few sentences. I mean, I'm happy to help. I think all that's available is what is in the executive order, right? There's not really further things to add beyond what's in the executive order, but we may want to at least acknowledge it because the public posting date of this will be after the executive order came out.
Okay. All right.
Robert, your hand was raised though.
Yeah, if I may, and I've been flip-flopping around on this, as I think the rest of America has. But you know, the on again, off again tariff discussions, you know, I think we end up having to make a reference to kind of the changeability of this market that can be effectuated by these pronouncements. because if they happen, it's going to be dramatic. And so I think we at least have to say, hey, there's darkness on the horizon from kind of increased tariff discussions as they relate to pharmaceuticals, especially generics, because most of them come from Southeast Asia.
Yeah, I don't disagree with Mr. Judge. I believe there will be a real impact, and because of the timeliness of this report, I mean, I do think we have to state not a bias or opinion, but that it's certainly going to impact the supply chain, right, at a minimum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so just a reference to it in some way, it could be 1 or 2 sentences, but I think we have to at least say we're paying attention.
And again, keeping in mind the executive order came out this morning, right?
Well,
So
but we've
last
been
night.
having discussion. We've been having discussion for 83 days. We, the American public.
Yes, and because Courtney's highlighting another section that I added, not sure what personal notes I might have added to myself in this too. My intention with this was just to highlight that there may be an impact where access is a challenge if pharmacies are stuck in the middle between acquisition costs rising potentially because of tariffs and reimbursement potentially not keeping up pace with acquisition cost changes. So that was my intention with adding that additional language there.
I would agree. Thank you. Yeah.
Any comments from board members? We'll go ahead and accept that.
Maybe we should put a disclaimer that all of this is subject to any executive orders that may come down in the future.
Okay.
Because we don't really know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I was trying to do.
Dr. Hartang, here under the GPO, was there anything?
So I'm going to have to ask others to kind of opine about this because this is not my area of vast understanding, but it seems like we start here talking about GPOs that, again, are negotiated on behalf of pharmacies, payers, and healthcare stakeholders in the state. And then it kind of moves to these other GPOs that, in my understanding, is they're have been developed to basically negotiate rebates on behalf of PBMs and in some way kind of providing another opaqueness about their whole rebate system. And so I don't know if they're the same, but it just seemed, I've always understood them to be a little bit different.
I hear what you're saying, Dr. Hartung. Oh, Roster Judge, you had your hand up, so you have the floor.
And you're on mute, Robert.
Following the rules too easily. So I think that comment from Dan is correct. I was flipping back and forth on this. If this is generic drug report, really the Red Oak and Claris are the entities that are focused principally in that area. I think of Zinc and Ascent as rebate aggregators, which is more often than not a branded drug activity. But I confess I'm not an expert in how those GPOs are really kind of run and administered. There may be some generic rebates that they coordinate as well, but the bulk of it would be Zinc and Ascent involvement, from my understanding, in generic drug pricing and rebating is limited relative to Claris One and Red Oak. Although I recognize that there's some literature that's cited down below that may refute the point that I just made. So I kind of flip back and forth on that, but I agree with what Dan's saying.
I think maybe one way to help clarify what Dr. Hartung, the situation he was outlining, is maybe we simply change or modify the subject or Courtney, can you help us go up to the heading of this section? Because I think, if I'm hearing you right, Dr. Hartung, some of the other things you mentioned, other GPOs, meaning like GPOs that might help independent pharmacies purchase drugs at an more affordable price or something, we actually don't really dive into detail on. To me, this whole section, even the subsection that we say international GPOs, maybe we could just change the subject heading, because I think most of this whole body focuses on GPOs that are essentially PBM affiliated. Could it be accurate statement that maybe we just changed the heading to like PBM affiliated GPOs? Would that solve, Dr. Hartung, some of the challenge you had? Because I don't actually even see that we really dove into any other type of GPO in the body of this section. And Mr. Judge, maybe you have color to add because your hand is raised.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna respond to that suggestion. I do believe it's accurate to the extent that we keep zinc and assent in this reference, that reference that you just described is
Okay.
accurate. Although I recognize that Claris and Red Oak do have some PBM ownership, but it's a retail PBM ownership on one case, and it's a wholesaler PBM relationship in another one. So so to characterize it as PBM driven deals, or
Well, I said
they
affiliated,
represented a bit.
right? I'm just trying to help us feel comfortable with the body of this content on this section, but if an alternative heading would make it more in alignment. Would you feel, Mr. Judge, more comfortable if we received some additional clarity in the next meeting from staff on those two organizations and their references, or are you proposing simply removing those two? I do know we have the insulin discussion, and it's a very hearty one that we can move forward with as well. So
here's what I can suggest, and the clock ran out on me. Because I was troubled by this section, not troubled, but I think it could be clarified a bit, and I just ran out of time with my edits. So I advised staff that I wasn't going to get it done, and to proceed, because I could live with it, but it's not completely accurate from my perspective. So if it's acceptable to staff and the board, I'd be willing to take a stab at that and just submit it back.
Yeah, that's.
Please do. We need accuracy, right? So accuracy is critical.
Okay. Thank you. I'll do that.
Robert, we can touch base on timeline to get a write-up back to us then.
Sure.
Right.
Thank you.
All right. Then coming down to the last bit, I think it's just in the conclusion where it's just restructuring a sentence for clarification. So if there's no further feedback or suggestions or edits, I will take the edits, and Robert, you and I will be in touch, and Dan, you and I will be in touch about those other sections. And I appreciate your time and conversation on this. Back to you, Chair Bailey.
Thank you to everyone. I do now want to reference that we are going to move back into an executive session. Don't have my language before me, but as a reminder, the media is welcome to join. The media is not able to report on anything that we discussed during the executive session. Focus of executive session is legal guidance. No decision making will occur during executive session. Apologize to everyone that we went into this twice, but we experienced technical difficulties. So Melissa, if you could please invite board members into executive session, and we will continue our executive session. My intention would be that this executive session lasts no more than 10 minutes. All right, well, I would like to announce to everyone that we are now going to take our delayed 5-minute break. So our 5-minute break starts now at 10:54. We will resume here at 10:59 a.m. Pacific. See everyone in 5 minutes. All right, I would like to welcome everyone back from our 5-minute break. Melissa, could you just please call roll to confirm we have a quorum to proceed?
Yes. Chair Shelley Bailey,
Present.
Vice Chair Amy Burns,
Present.
Dan Hartung,
Present.
Lori Hoagland,
Present.
Robert Judge,
Present.
John Murray,
Present.
Dan Kennedy.
Present.
We have a quorum, Chair Bailey.
Thank you, Melissa. I do want to make an announcement before we have Courtney Whitlock help facilitate us through the board review and possible vote on data sets related to insulin products. I do want to ask my fellow board members here today, to the extent that we determine it necessary to extend the meeting by 15 minutes, is anyone unavailable to extend the meeting by 15 minutes today? Okay, to the extent that
As long as it's 15 minutes only.
okay, well, I hear what you're saying, Mr. Judge. Thank you for providing that information. I will wait to make the comment that we will for sure do it and see how our discussion goes throughout. But thank you for your flexibility. So welcome, Courtney, to help facilitate us through a board review and possible vote on data sets and OAR 925-200-0010 criteria to select subset of insulin products for affordability reviews.
I believe that we need to.
I skipped a section. Thank you, Courtney. So we are going to be voting. We are going to be discussing voting methodology for affordability review determinations. One of the purposes of PDAB is to conduct affordability reviews on prescription drugs and insulin products as directed by ORS 646A.694. Today, Courtney Whitlock, Senior Policy Analyst, will lead the discussion on the timeline, process, and voting methodology for the board's affordability reviews. Welcome, Courtney. Courtney, you have the floor.
All right, thank you, Chair Bailey. Appreciate the opportunity to discuss some options with the board today regarding the upcoming affordability review. This is just a highlight of the calendar, kind of a roadmap to show what's going on and where we're progressing to. Last month, the board decided on a subset of list for carrier drug to be submitted back to carriers under a data call. Intention today is also to review insulin products that will also go back to carriers for additional clarification of their coverages of those drugs. On top of that, we also have requests for information surveys that are being out. We are asking that they be submitted by the end of the month. And this is to help to facilitate at least a baseline of information that we can obtain. If additional information is needed, we will reevaluate the need for the survey and open it up for extended time. On top of that, I really do want to encourage the public, manufacturers, anybody who's associated with any drug under review to continue to provide comments, written comments, or come to the meetings to discuss their impacts of those drugs. Just because the surveys just need to have the stop at the end of the month to create a baseline of understanding of the material. We are still very much welcoming any other feedback that throughout the rest of the time of the affordability review to obtain information from public and the stakeholders involved. Again, each drug under review, the intention is to continue to have information come in. And if we need additional information, it is also considered for us to reach out to individuals, manufacturers individually to have it clarified, but we really need to know what the subset list is going to be and what those drugs are going to be for under review. The intention of the May meeting is to have patients and caregivers, individuals with specialty of the scientific and medical experience to come and provide any additional information about those drugs. And again, this is also open to manufacturers, but the priority will be for patients and caregivers because the impact of those drugs, we really want to listen to the consumers that are impacted by the pricing, the cost of the drugs under review. So once we have the analysis of the drugs in June, I would like to have another discussion with the board. If any of the drugs with all the data points returned would like to remove additional drugs from the subset list. Right now we have 27. We did go back and there were some that had orphan drug designations, and we do have to look at removing those. We will touch base on that in a little bit, but for the most part, going back in June and kind of reevaluating to ensure that we have the drugs with the most meaningful impact to carry forward for the rest of the month of July through October. So again, this is high level. For this month, and I do apologize because I know there's some decisions that we need from the board, staff needs from board members to help set up the review process, and I'm comfortable with this conversation kind of also rolling over into next month, as long as we don't impact too much time for consumers to have the opportunity to speak to the board. And again, the meeting for next month is the intention of a hearing, so we'll be engaging. It's not just about people coming and providing statements. I would really encourage board members to ask questions to those that that present information, so that you are finding the most information. So when we look at the drugs in June, you're getting a full scope of the information to determine what drugs may create the most impact to this, or may possibly show an impact to the system or at patient out-of-pocket gas cost. So to start off with, and Chair Bailey, I see your hand up.
Sorry, so just in summary, May is an opportunity for us to hear feedback, right? And then in June, board members will have an opportunity to ask questions or kind of discuss together as a board some of that, and there will be time and space for board members in June to potentially remove drugs from that original 27 drug universe. Did I hear you accurately on that?
That's what the intention is. Yeah, we want to make sure that when the board is seeing drugs that are going to proceed to make the most impact based off of the additional data from the data call and from consumer feedback.
That's in alignment with what I was thinking, but thank you for confirming.
Yes. Mr. Judge, I see your hand up. And you're on mute.
Thank you for that. Just to go a little more deeply into that then, when we look at the June timeframe and for the board to have additional consideration, that additional consideration shall be limited to the additional data that's been gathered, as well as the learnings from the stakeholder, or will the board have the latitude to introduce other considerations?
No, the intention is to just look at the drugs that have already been selected to the subset list, and then see if any additional drugs need to fall off of the subset list before we set up the rest of the review process. Like how many drugs are going to fall into each month, those kind of things.
Yeah, no, I get that. I'm just trying to think about, maybe I'm not asking it correctly. My preference is that when we get in the June timeframe, that we are limiting our deliberations on whether drugs should fall off based upon the additional learnings from the data and from the stakeholder, and not to introduce any other considerations. That would be my preference. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And Laura, I see your hand up as well.
Unmute. Okay. So I was interested in a little bit more information on how things are going with the RFI distribution, just it is short duration for responses. And of course, we have urban and rural interest in getting a broad sweep of people across our state. So how is that going, and how have we been getting that information out?
Thank you, Lori, for the question. I believe Ralph has some of the more overarching statistics. I can say just from the survey responses that we've had 9 from the patient and caregiver, 7 primarily from patients, 1 from a caregiver, and 1 from an advocacy group. We've had 1 from a manufacturer, 1 from a safety net provider, and 4 from individuals with scientific and medical training, and then none from the PBMs and none from Spanish-speaking patients. And then Ralph, did you have any other oversight on the higher review for impact of community
Yeah,
engagement?
I am bringing that up right now if you want to go to Dan's question, and I will
Hard time.
have that for you.
Yeah, just again, process wise, I know we've heard that the time frame for stakeholder input has been constrained, and that's a concern. And what it looks like we're gathering stakeholder information on all 27 in the subset list. And all that stuff's, the process is we're going to synthesize that stuff in the slide for the in May, and then it's going to be presented in June. I mean, but then as the subset list reviews 1 through 5 for the different meetings, we'll go over different chunks of the subset list. I mean, is it possible to extend the deadline for, if we're not reviewing a drug until October for the cohort review 5, to extend the deadline for drugs in those later cohorts for a later day, so we have more time for stakeholders to present or to get their information in? Even obviously some for the cohort 1 we have to start sometime, but it seems like the way I understand this chart, we're doing everything stakeholder wise in step 1, where we could probably just sprinkle it through as we review each cohort of drugs in the subset list.
And again, the initial information needed to create a baseline is it's just for the finishing for April. We can open it back up, and for each of those drug and patients and caregivers and manufacturers, they can continue to provide feedback through the entire review process. Just because you're trying to understand kind of what's happening to help facilitate a discussion in June as well, you're not cutting off the opportunity for people to provide feedback at any time. But if the board feels overarching that the feedback you've heard, that the surveys themselves shouldn't have a deadline on them, then that is a discussion that the board should provide to staff, a decision, because we work for you. And if you're concerned with that deadline of April 30th and you don't want a deadline until the end of the review process, we can open that up. Just know that we wouldn't be able to create a baseline of information. It would constantly be rolling. So that's just from a data statistics need, that in order to create the packets and the material to have everything kind of shored up for that information. But I am happy to follow the lead of what the board would want staff to do.
Okay, well, my question was more of just clarifying for me what was on this figure and understanding the concerns from the public
Sure.
and from stakeholders. And so, and then just advancing this idea, which I don't know if it's feasible or not, but just that would give at least some more time for the drug. If we need to do these reviews and kind of this these rolling deadlines, we just keep it open, and then for the later drugs that are in our cohort. So
Sure, and Dan and board members, I can provide you with a status report on that and really flagging what Courtney said and that we all support you. And if it is your direction to extend that survey for another duration, we will make that happen and we will figure out what that is. To that point, we have received a total of 9 responses, 4 of them being from patients, caregivers, or advocacy groups, actually 3 patients, 1 caregiver. We have received 4 responses from 2 medical doctors, 1 DO, and 1 psychiatrist, actually 3 MDs, a psychiatrist, and a DO, as well as a safety net provider. And this is in response to a broader effort that program staff mailed out and communicated more than 700 flyers with that code on it, the QR code, in addition to social media engagements and both English and Spanish. So I can assure you, board, that our staff has made a bona fide good faith effort in being responsive and reaching out to all the folks that you all identified, including the Care Assist program and folks in that community, et cetera. So again, that is the baseline right now. And if it is the board's will and direction for us to extend the survey, that is what we will certainly do.
Mr.
I would
Judge?
note that we've also solicited, at the request of members of the Senate Healthcare Committee and House Healthcare Committee, to include information about this in their constituent news, as well as other outlets. So again, bona fide good faith effort to do extensive outreach and engagement on this front.
Mr. Judge, I think your hand was raised first.
You're on mute, Robert.
Just following the rules and I can't even do it right. So there's some built-in tension here. And I do appreciate the information you shared, Ralph, with kind of the good faith effort it's been to kind of create awareness and solicit participation. And, you know, we can only do that so much, right? And organizations can elect to do it or not. Notwithstanding the comments that I think we heard today, that the length of and complexity of completing the assessments, it may be a big ask. What I'm wrestling with here is, and I'm all for kind of getting as much stakeholder feedback and input as possible from as broad an audience as possible, but also worry about equity and making sure that because the cohorts are put together, and I don't want to shortchange an opportunity in one cohort just because it's earlier in the cycle than a cohort that would be at the end of the cycle to get feedback on that. So there's some tension there as a board I think we have to think through. I think I can get comfortable with the fact that we have a window, starts A and ends at B, and we've made these initiatives to solicit feedback. And at the end of that period, if the window we have to deal with what we got. As long as we can look ourselves in the mirror and say, did we do our best effort? Nobody's ever going to be happy in this exercise. But, you know, I think as a board, we have to think about equity in the process for the drugs that are going to be in a cohort, and make sure that each drug that could be evaluated had the same opportunity for stakeholder feedback.
And Robert, if I may even just paint a little more color on these outreach efforts with some specific information, we've reached out to 21 different medical societies in Oregon, 14 different Oregon legislators, the entirety of our government delivery setup, 46 drug manufacturers, every PBM registered, 33 safety net providers, 272 Oregon pharmacies, and multiple state-run programs. So again, just to reinforce to you the effort that has gone into this by staff.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I just want to be really mindful of time. I do appreciate the conversation from the board. But I think what staff needs to know is if the surveys need to be extended out, then we will remove the deadline for that, and then we can just keep the rolling data. Just know that you'll never get a benchmark point, and we're happy to do that. Again, I appreciate the conversation. Staff needs a decision from the board. Do you want it extended, or are we good with trying to just get the baseline and then reopen it back up once we get the cohorts understood, what groups are going to be associated with each one of the months under review? And
Can
Chair
I-
Bailey, I see your
Yeah,
hand.
I'd like to propose that we keep it, we initially close it so that we can make, I do want us to have our best attempt at consistency. I mean, to leaning in according to what you've said about data analysis. We also do have our time frame for our May meeting and our June decision making. So I guess what I would like to propose is that we still highly encourage everyone to provide as much feedback as possible within the timeline we've provided, so that for our June meeting, we have all the information, or we have as much as we can by that meeting. So basically keeping the current timeline, whatever that date is, but then reopening it back up, because as a reminder, when we do our affordability reviews, we are still able and interested and desirous of, taking feedback that will continue to help us during those affordability reviews. So use it, pause it, open it back up, so that all that rich information is still part of what we use when we do the affordability reviews.
Thank you, Chair
Is that in alignment? Ms. Hoagland, your hand is raised.
A couple things I wanted to bring up, because I think it's extremely important that we get good feedback from all populations. I'm really worried about the Spanish-speaking population and their fear for, standing up right now in any way. And I think we should think about how we can access that community, perhaps through community groups. They may not be as comfortable responding to something from a pharmacy or email for that matter. And I think their feedback is important. I do think that we should get a lot more input from folks. So I would be comfortable with extending the deadline a little bit. I really think we need to have a robust input.
Again, being mindful of time, we really do need to talk about the insulin drugs. So what right now, I think the most important question, I've heard two different recommendations from board members to either keep it open or close it and keep the standard timeline. Again, with the intention to open them back up with additional information once we know what the cohort are going to be for the month under review. Any other board, or I'm kind of needing some board guidance here on what
Do we need a vote? I mean, do we need a vote, or?
This isn't a voting option. This is basically a discussion and the board providing the information to staff. Do we close it? Do we keep to the original plan to close the surveys to get the baseline of information, and then take that information and have the better determination in June what the removal of the drug should be, or the stay on of drugs, and then open them back up for those drugs specifically? And again, I probably narrowed the list for each of the consumers that they have the drop down list on their surveys. It would be very specific to those drugs. Because right now there's 27. We already know that there's at least a few of them with orphan drugs that need to be removed, and those, those kind of things. So what is the most important information that the board wants to receive when you review these again in June?
Board Member Kennedy, your hand is raised.
Yes, I was just going to concur with Chair Bailey. I applaud that plan of having a set closure period with the ability to open up as necessary going forward, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Robert Judge, I see your hand up real quick.
Courtney, are you asking for a movement?
No,
motion?
this is a decision that, again, kind of, I'm hearing that for the most part from, Dan and Shelley, that closing it to get the information that's more relevant for the June review. Lori said that she'd like to keep it open.
Yeah, my preference is along the lines of what Chair Bailey and Mr. Kennedy said, is that, we need the data. We need the information. The window should close when the window was determined to be closed. And if, when we get to the next phase, if we need to open for more information for a limited set, that to me makes a lot of sense. And it's consistent with what I was trying to say earlier.
Perfect, thank you. John Murray, I see your hand up before.
Yeah, I would also concur with Robert and Chair about the closing. I understand the idea of equity. I understand the idea of outreach to vulnerable populations, especially Spanish speaking. I would hope that our FQHCs, for example, even in my local county, would reach out to their customers who have a target population of Hispanics. And so I'm hoping, I've seen the outreach, I've seen it in the ground here in Morrow County of the PDAB board reaching out for information. It is extensive. And I just hope that the organizations that receive them follow through or do their best to gather information or to encourage information. So.
Thank you, John.
But
All
I
right.
do want to clarify what I said. I don't see it as an if, I see it as an absolute. We close it, we get the data we need, but then we open it so that that information is still passed during the affordability reviews.
Okay, so I'm going to take that, and I do want to go over and start talking about the insulin because we're getting to press on time.
And I also want to make an announcement that we do need to extend this meeting to 12:15 in alignment with board member schedules.
Perfect. Thank you, Chair Bailey. So again, I'm going to take the advice, and I do need to continue this conversation next month. So we're going to have to run into a little bit of the hearing time, but I will provide a more detail within the timeline now that we kind of have some guidance. We'll have next month to kind of set up some of the questions that staff really does need to answer, so we know how June and July are going to be set up. So thank you, board members. I do really appreciate your time and your collaboration for that discussion. But I'm going to
And Courtney, if I may, real quick, just to share a little insight and context with folks, as I mentioned, our social media campaign, we actually have substantially more impressions, reaches, post engagements, and clicks on our Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook post in Spanish than we do in English. So just put that out to you that this has been a well thought out and coordinated effort to engage folks from all different backgrounds, cultures, and communities within our state. Thank you, Courtney, for all you're doing.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen again. Chair B, do you want to do an announcement for this?
Yep. So we are now moving on to the last month. The board selected a subset of 27 prescription drugs for affordability reviews. The list is posted on the PDAB website, including the minutes from the March 19th meeting. Today, the board will now review the data and possibly vote on a subset of insulin products for affordability review. Preliminary lists and dashboard are posted on the PDAB website, and links are included in today's agenda. Courtney is going to help facilitate leading us through this discussion. Senior Policy Analyst. Courtney, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Bailey and board members. So like last month, you reviewed the carrier data on the drugs. This is just insulin. The difference between the insulin product versus the carrier data is that insulin product is already drilled down to the NDC. And everything is based off of gross amount. And just as a reminder, also the last time that this review was done, board members decided to look primarily at generic drugs under subclasses. So that was fast acting, rapid acting, and long acting. And you selected a few drugs from each of those categories that seem to have the biggest impact. So with that, I wanted to ask the board, what is your initial criteria for this review? And what do you feel works best for identifying some insulin products to create a subset list with? Do you want to start off with generics again, or do you want me to start a drill down of any removal of anything?
And I think this is our time. Oh, Dr. Burns.
Yeah, Dr. Burns.
I mean, I don't want to get us like really far into the weeds. I think we got a little bit off the top track when we did this last time, but I did think that our initial idea of picking like a one long acting or having a representative drug, at least one drug from say rapid acting and one from long acting was a good plan. So that would be my suggestion.
And Dr. Hartung?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we should have, because 1 to 2 per class, maybe 1 each, and then, that means we'll have, what, 5 potential, if there's 4 or 5 potential drugs or insulins for the subset list.
Did you want to include the intermediate and insulin mixes into that as well, or is the focus mainly around long acting, rapid acting, and short acting?
I mean, I think if having one from long acting and one from rapid acting would be our primary goal. We can look at all of them. I think you're going to find fewer choices for, say, intermediate or short acting. So they're probably going to fall out, but we
Yeah, so
can.
shown on screen, is this the
Yep.
intermediate? There's a handful here.
Yeah.
Short acting, as you said, again, very short list for short acting.
Right.
Going to long and rapid. So I can select those two, and does the board have a preference? Do you want to review generics, or is the brand is important too? So if you look at generics on those, these are the ones, Alessapros, Asparts, that come up just under generic. If you wanted to include both of them, this is your list to kind of select from.
It's just gonna be an odd one compared to insulin. Is just, especially with the amount of expansion on the market for biosimilars and generics, it's gonna be a little bit different than the other review that we're gonna do. I think just for uniformity in the insulins, my suggestion would be that we look at it all and make a decision based on whatever the criteria is that, how we decide to slice and dice the data from there. But I wouldn't necessarily pull out the generics, because pulling out the generics would say leave in biosimilars. I would just leave it all and do it by subclass, and then however we decide to look at it would be my suggestion.
So let me draw this down to just show long acting for generic and brand name. And right now I have it categorized by the overall spend. But if I go over here to kind of show you, so this is a new sheet from last time, and basically it just indicates the median total for patient paid versus the overall spend, median overall spend per patient, and then the median overall spend per prescription. So I'm gonna jump one more to kind of different visualization here. When you look at this, and this is for brand and generic just for the long acting, the larger bubbles indicate higher utilization. So here we have Lantus has the highest level of utilization and the highest cost. Next is the Bezlar QuickPen, again, larger bubble indicating a larger utilization of the drug. Tresiba Flextip is a smaller utilization with one of the top 3 spends. And Robert, I see your hand up. I didn't want to get to you before I continue on. And you're on mute.
continue your journey, and I'll weigh in after you're finished with your point. Thank you.
Okay. So again, down here, or it's indicating that Lantis, Solstar, Vasgar, their prices are relatively where they are because of the utilization. Tresiba is a smaller utilization with still an impact. And if you see here, it says the total prescriptions filled were 2,800 for patients, but if you come here, trying to get the price. So the total patient paid out of this one is the 34.2 with a 2.22 million paid by the payers. So that could be a consideration unless the board sees something different. Lantis is kind of the same, where it has still higher cost with low medium utilization. So Robert, do you want to?
Yeah, I wanted to kind of weigh in on kind of the point that Dr. Burns was making. I do think it makes sense to look at brand and generic together, because I think there's information when there's a generic or even a generic alternative to a brand. The information that's displayed gives you some relevancy there. And there's a couple of products that just jump out at me when I was going through that when I was looking at the data. Then it pivots to do we want to look at kind of the subclass side of this, and I think it's worthy maybe to at least look at the three major subclasses, but I think it might be difficult to kind of say, well, we have to choose select a drug from each subclass or two drugs from each subclass. So I'm not sure I land squarely on having to do the analysis on a select set of subclasses. I kind of like the idea of looking at it its entirety, brand to generic, and then, well, these tables are very insightful. The all-in data is probably where you get the most insight, because you could sort and draw out the elements that I think we as a board would want to look at, like what's happening with WAC, what's the average price increase, what's the patient cost, and how does that stack up directly against what the plan paid amount is. So I think you can look at that in its totality, but I think we may find that there are more than one drug in a therapeutic category that may make it, or subclass that may make it worthy for us to look at all the insulins together, because we might say, hey, there's 3 products in one category that are worth studying and no products in another category that are worth studying.
Yeah, and so what you're seeing on screen, Robert, is long acting only, and it's brand and generic. So, and it covers the patient paid, the overall spend, payer paid. The only thing it's not identifying here is the WAC. Which we have ranges, I think, here for WAC. Oh, that's just for WAC increases.
Yeah.
So, but we can go back to the spreadsheet.
I mean, the visualization tool is great because it gives you visibility and a snapshot for relativities.
So if you're looking at, so this is the percent change of WAC from the previous year. 3%, and I'm not seeing the actual WAC cost on here. And it's not in, because these are just pulled directly from these ones, so. All right, so here's WAC. again. Is the board interested in looking at WAC information, or because the other thing is our own, or the rule itself, because we're still here with the drugs, is to focus on overall spend, per patient spend, and patient out-of-pocket spend, according to our rule. So that's why the dashboards were set up, and most of the information was set up to follow the guidelines under the rule.
I don't think we need to worry. These drugs are so heavily discounted that I think WAC is less relevant.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Hartog.
That's just my opinion.
And Shelley?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Robert. The visualization is very helpful, but it also, I mean, some of that's components of plan design, right, with how big the bubbles are. So I would prefer personally, when I was looking at this, to kind of focus on, and we can toggle back and forth, but kind of looking at, you know, patient pay per RX, payer pay per RX, because from my perspective, that would be helpful. I know the visualization was built on that, but sometimes seeing it in Excel in that way and being able to filter that way. But I fully support looking at those subclasses, and maybe we don't force ourselves to pick some from each subclass, but at least look at it from the lens of each subclass, getting us going here.
Okay. So again, right now we're looking at long-acting insulin.
Robert?
Yeah, if we kind of pause here, the thing that kind of jumps out at me is, and that's why I like looking at branded generics together, because we have, if you look at like Tresiba, which has a generic available, what is it? It's
Degludec.
Degludec, yeah. There's really an interesting price disparity between the branded price per prescription versus the generic option. So that just kind of makes me go, oh, well, that's interesting. And that reflects right into what it's costing a patient from a plan design perspective. So I like looking at branded generics together because I think it flags interesting results to look at. I have my own thoughts about kind of this list and where I'd focus, but that's an example of looking at the relativities between branded generics to kind of identify potential drugs to look at.
All right, so I don't know, maybe Dr. Burns is maybe have to lean on your expertise. Since you know the brands versus generics a little bit more in detail, is it worth looking at if we select a brand name and the generic is also identified here, to also look at the generic drug?
I mean, it's not a bad idea, but I will kind of make this a little more complicated, because when you talk about glargine, there's like 15 different glargines available. And so there are ones that have, there are brand glargines that have designated generic, so interchangeable products, but then there are biosimilar glargines, which is why I suggested we just leave it all, because unlike, say, other medications that, like traditional PO tablet medications, it isn't necessarily a 1-to-1 here. There's biosimilars and generics. And so you could pull out the generics, but then you would only be pulling out the generics that are, again, interchangeable, and you would still have biosimilars. So to me, that is a distinction that I don't know that I would be comfortable making. I guess I would, if we're gonna because it's a very odd, it's an odd situation because of the difference or lack of difference. It depends on how you decide to look at it. That's why I suggested we leave the generics in, because otherwise, would we leave the biosimilars in?
Robert?
Yeah, Amy, I want to make sure that I wasn't being misinterpreted. I'm totally in agreement with what you're saying. I was just talking about them in terms of comparators. But I do, I mean, your example of glargine is great because, right, Toujeo doesn't have a generic available, but you have some insulin glargines out there that are biosimilars or, you know, alternatives to those drugs. So the relevancy of being able to look at them altogether, I think, is interesting and maybe worthwhile.
Yeah, I mean, my suspicion is some of these are going to fall out by nature of how we look at cost. So I don't know. I understand. Yeah, I agree. It's always interesting to look at when a generic comes to market and how it compares. But I would leave it on the list for now.
Yeah, because we do need to identify a couple insulin products and select like what's criteria that the board can look at. And yeah, Chair Bailey, I'm sorry.
Well, can we possibly look at, because I mean, we do to try to do our data call and be in alignment with what the rest of our agenda is throughout the next upcoming months. It was my intention that we would be voting on the insulin list because it was actually our intention to vote last month. Could we possibly, would it be in alignment with what some of the clinicians here are saying today or colleagues to like filter by like payer pay amount per patient and then like patient pay amount and see what we see? And I'm not suggesting filtering out a generic or a biosimilar, just trying to look at the top. Dr. Hartung.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the data we have here are so, you know, they are what they are. They're gross data. We know that insulins, they have huge discounts. So even, you know, what we're seeing here in terms of payer paid per you know, I agree, like just surfacing the top paid per patient from the payer perspective and the is misleading because we're not seeing the 50% discounts or whatever. But this is what we have, so we have to go start somewhere and maybe just surfacing the most expensive drugs in the state and within these different categories from the payer's perspective is where we start. And then once we get the affordability reviews, the subset list for a deeper dive, I assume we'll have net spending that'll kind of reveal some of the nuances.
Well, I'm sure I'll get a letter that I've contradicted myself here, but I guess the one thing about looking at total payer paid amount, of course, is that it will disproportionately pull up drugs that could already have been highly rebated, but were plan preferred. I mean, so maybe I want to redact the comment I made that wasn't in alignment with previous comments I made in this one. I mean, could we look at like WAC and patient pay amount? Would those be two meaningful metrics? Again, knowing I have no idea why there's balloons here, by the way. But would those be meaningful? But Amy or Dr. Burns, your hand is raised.
Yeah, I mean, Amy's fine. So quick question, Courtney. This includes Medicaid though, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's going to throw off the patient paid per prescription, right? So we're going to have an artificially lower amount since, you know, a third of the population of the state is on Medicaid and has no out of pocket. I kind of like what Dan's saying about looking at the overall spend, acknowledging that is not necessarily net, but at least that's point of sale. And I think that that makes some sense to look at.
And also just keep in mind that the overall spend is also associated with utilization. And so that's why I was showing you the visualization where, you know, like Lantus and Bogar have the higher utilization, but then like Traceba Flex Touch, even stuff components of Lantus, the Tajaros. So I'm not sure if those are more meaningful because they still have higher price impacts with lower people, with not as many utilizing the drug. So unless utilization is something that you believe is also a financial impact to the review.
I think utilization is important because that's showing how it impacts the state. So I mean, I like this payer paid per patient because, again, with the caveats, because it captures, you know, gross costs overall per patient. And then to a certain extent, we can also look at the, you know, utilization and say, you know, if it's a low utilized drug in the state, we probably don't want to go there. But you know, a lot of these drugs are used pretty heavily.
So I just filtered by payer paid per prescription, and then this is payer paid per patient. Traceba Flex Touch, Tajaro, Max Star, Semglee. Do you want to select any of these drugs to send to a data call? And again, you can collect it from each subclass, and then we can send it over to the carriers, and they can provide us more detailed information for them.
Yeah, there were two products that jumped out on me in this long acting category. I referenced them earlier, the Traceba product as well as the Toujeo product. And they're both interesting in their own right. You know, Traceba because it's such a high price per prescription, and the payer paid per patient is high relative to its alternative. Just it kind of stands out. So I thought that probably would be worth kind of investigating and adding to the list. And then the other was Toujeo, and well, it's an odd product because it doesn't have a generic alternative. It has a higher cost, really, compared to other generic insulins. Like the Duglets or the products out there. So you know that seems like it'd be worthy for a comparison. I misspoke. The insulin glargines that are out there relative to that, it might be relevant for kind of a further investigation.
Yeah, Amy, I see your hand up.
I mean, not to split hairs, Robert, but the Toujeo is a high concentrated insulin, so it's not necessarily like, say, Semglee is a 1-to-1 with another glargine.
Totally get it.
Toujeo doesn't have a generic or biosimilar on the market that has the same concentration.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that to throw it out. I'm just to make a clarifying point.
Yeah, and I agree with that. It's a different type of long-acting insulin for sure in terms of its concentrate, but there's a pretty significant price difference for for a basal insulin product. That to me said, even though they're not the same, you know, one's I think it's a 3-to-1 differentiation. It just seems to stand out. Not to say that it's a bad actor at all, but it might be worthy of investigation.
Again, does any board members have recommendations of insulins that they want to bring forward to submit to the carriers for part of the subset list? You want to do the Trajaro, there's two of them, there's the Max Soul Star, and then there's the Soul Star. The Toshiba Flex Touch. We can add all those and just send them over to the carriers for additional information, and then we can also look at the rapid acting.
So I would say I think it would be important for us just to kind of be clear what I believe I heard what Mr. Judge said. So he was essentially filtering off of total patient pay, or at least I was looking at total patient pay per number of number of patients. And then in the case of the Tresiba, did I hear you right, Mr. Judge, that your other factor was the price of alternatives in that insulin type. Am I hearing it accurately of kind of where you were headed in your thought process?
And Shelley,
Yeah.
sorry. I don't know if anybody else noticed that Shelley has, or is that just my speaker? Okay, yeah, Shelley, there's something going on with your speaker. There's really
Yeah, you're very grumbly.
Yeah.
Okay. Don't know if I can fix it, but thank you.
Yeah. But I got the gist of what you were saying, Chair Bailey, and yeah.
I just would like us to at least state the why, and then maybe we possibly apply that same why to the other two classes. If again, sorry for the balloons, if that is in alignment with what we could do in the other two classes. I just would like us to be clear on that.
Yeah, and it may not.
It may not be. Maybe we can't.
Others, but yeah. So when I think about Tejeo, I was really looking at it from a relatively high cost compared to its generic alternative. And it has a generic alternative, so it was an easy comparison. It may also be, well, it's a little bit different, but looking at other insulin glargine products, it stands out. Like, it's not the same as Lantus, but it just kind of stands out. When I think about
the high patient pay per RX and high cost relative to similar products.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Dr. Hartung, I see your hand up.
Yeah, this is a very challenging category to with this stage of data with the data we have to kind of make these types of decisions.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, I mean, is it feasible just to say, can we do a data call on like all the glargines or all the degludec? Because even if we pick one of the products or whatever within glargine or degludec or whatever, or we're only going to get that fine of a data for that one product, and then we're just going to be blind by about what the other similar generics or biosimilars are doing. And I don't know, it's just hard to evaluate one of these things in isolation, because I guess I'm thinking like the next step here. So like, could we just say, let's just do a review on all glargines? Or just throwing it out as like a radical
possibility
idea.
I think Dr. Hartung, I think those are options as long as we are in agreement with what we're deciding to use as our driver for this round of the insulin framework. That's correct? Is that correct, Courtney? So we define it as a board that's what we want to do, and then that is something that we would have an option to do.
Yeah, so again, I just filtered it off of insulin, degludec, and you have the Tracebas, which I believe Traceba was on our list last time. That was voted to be, one of the impacts to the system. Go to the glargine. Again, you're looking at the Lantus Soul Star, the Baslogar, and those kind of things.
And then can we see the Detamir?
Detamir is a little more, oops, sorry.
That's off market.
Yeah, so you just have Livermore.
I mean, with what we've seen, at least from what in the framework Dr. Hartung outlined, I guess I'd like to propose that we do then a call on the degludec specifically, because what I see in that data is that the degludec has high for many of the products, or is that the degludec, or am I saying the wrong one? I saw high patient pay per prescription on, or the glargine. I meant glargine. Sorry. Kind of consistently higher, more patient pay per prescription. So I guess my comment would be maybe what Dr. Hartung outlined would be an approach we might want to consider for this round of affordability reviews.
Okay. Is it glargine? Is it this list that you like to send over for?
Dr. Hartung, was glargine what I heard you I know you were just giving a for example, so now was something like this in alignment with what you were referencing?
Yeah, I mean, something like this, again, just because I could see us get into a situation where if we at this stage select like one of these glargines, and then we get the data call and it has all this interesting information about net price and things like that, and we're like, oh, well, what about these other things that are potentially competitors and how do they stack? And so if we just tackle these insulins as just a large at the generic level or at the molecule level, then we can actually be more informed in the affordability reviews. Because right now we're just, we know the state spends a lot of money on insulin glargine products as a whole, but aside from that, we don't know much more than that. And we know which ones are being utilized a lot, I guess.
Okay, and Lori, I see your hand up.
I support the idea of doing the glargine category because of the total number of patients affected. And I like the idea of doing a comparison within the same class.
Mr. Judge?
Yeah, along the same lines. I mean, what we're doing, if we go down this route, is, ultimately looking at a class for relativities to determine if there's a product in there that stands out. I think that would essentially be what we'd be doing by going down that route. And I think that's a fine path to take for this, because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is figure out, mechanisms for affordability or better affordability. So if we do a kind of a subclass review and something stands out, then that gives us kind of the information we need to go forward.
And I would concur with the glargine. I think if we request information for the whole glargine group, we may see the strange inconsistencies in affordability come out.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I will put that in for the first review to go to the carriers. So going on to rapid acting, sorry. Is there a
Dr. Hartung?
Oh, I was just wondering, should we just stop there and just say?
That's what I
then,
intended with my comment.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have our hands full with glargine, so maybe we just hold off on the rest.
Okay, well then we'll send.
I agree.
So I believe we do need a formal motion and a second and a vote related to pulling this initial subset list on insulin. Is that accurate, Courtney?
Yes, that's correct. If this is what the board agrees that needs to be associated with the subset list to send for the data call, and further review, a motion does need to be made.
Thank you, Courtney. Do we have a motion related to the guarding?
Is there kind of a formal statement?
I'm not sure if Melissa, did you have a formal statement available?
Yes, I'll share that right now.
Yeah. Sorry about that, board members. And I will stop sharing.
Can we acknowledge, I don't know, Dan just popped his hand up, and I think John Murray had his up and down. I want to make sure they have opportunity before we move for a vote if they needed further discussion.
Dr. Hartung?
I was just going to make the motion.
Okay, you have the floor.
Mr. Murray, did you have a comment?
Well, no, I was getting ready to make the motion before the
okay.
language was shown, so go ahead. Dan, I'll second. How about that?
Okay, yeah, so I move to approve the insulin product subset list for affordability reviews as discussed by the board today.
And I would second that motion, please.
Thank you for the motion and for the second. Melissa, if you could please call roll.
Dan Hartung,
Aye.
Lori Hoagland,
Aye.
thank you. Robert Judge,
Aye.
Dan Kennedy,
Aye.
John Murray,
Aye.
Vice Chair Amy Burns,
Aye.
Chair Shelley Bailey.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-1.
Melissa, thank you. I'd now like to move to the announcement section of our agenda. The next board meeting is May 2nd, 2025 at 9 a.m. Pacific. As a reminder, I also want to invite patients and caregivers to participate in our survey. These surveys are intended to collect information from people and organizations affected by the cost of prescription drugs. The survey can be found on our website and is offered in English and in Spanish. Please have feedback submitted by April 30th. Additionally, we encourage patients, caregivers, and individuals with scientific and medical training to please sign up to provide testimony at the May 21st board meeting about prescription drugs that have been selected for review. The list of drugs can be found on the PDEB website. The May meeting will provide the board with an opportunity to hear from people impacted or benefiting from these drugs. Regular board business will still occur, but will be limited. The QR code on the screen will take you to the PDEB website where you can sign up to speak at the May meeting and find the survey links and review the affordability drug review list. We look forward to hearing from you. And with there being no further business before the board,
Chair Bailey, if I may also add for folks that we will have Spanish language translation services available for the May 21st meeting, should there be folks that wish to offer testimony or comment in response to specific drugs in Spanish. Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph. And I'll add an ad hoc comment that as a reminder, we did speak today as a board that after the April 30th deadline, we still will use input provided to the board related to any drugs under affordability review to the best extent that we are able to when those drugs are being reviewed throughout the year. So with there being no further business before the board, all in favor of adjourning the meeting, please say yes.
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 Any opposed, please say no. All right, meeting is adjourned and look forward to seeing everyone next time on May 21st, 2025 at 9 a.m. Pacific. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
board
you.
members.
Thanks, everyone.
See you.